I stopped talking to everyone the day I realized that being around people made me feel more alone than actually being alone. That sounds strange, I know. But if you've ever felt it, you know exactly what I mean. It didn't happen overnight. It crept in slowly, the way cold does when you're sitting near an open window. You don't notice it at first. And then one day you're just frozen, and you can't quite remember when it started. My name is Ethan. I was 26 when everything went quiet. Not the world around me. Just me. I went quiet inside, and then I went quiet everywhere else too. I had a job, a decent one, at a mid-sized design firm where I sat at the third desk from the left and mostly kept to myself. I had a small apartment with a window that faced a brick wall. I had a phone full of contacts I never called. I had a life that looked completely fine from the outside and felt completely hollow from the inside. And I had gotten so used to that hollowness that I stopped questioning it. I think the turning point was my friend Ryan's birthday. Ryan was 28, loud in the best way, the kind of person who remembered everyone's coffee order and made you feel like the most important person in the room. He had invited maybe 30 people to a rooftop gathering. I showed up. I stood there with a drink in my hand and smiled at the right moments and nodded during conversations. And the entire time, I felt like I was watching it all through glass. Like I was there but not really there. Like everyone else had access to something I didn't. I left early. I told Ryan I had an early morning. He hugged me and said we should hang out properly soon. I said yes. I meant it too, in that moment. But I never followed up. And neither did he. And I told myself that was fine. That was just how things were. But here is the thing I didn't say out loud to anyone. Not once. It wasn't fine. None of it was fine. What happened next was so gradual that I didn't even notice I was doing it. I started canceling plans before people could invite me to things. I kept my responses short so conversations would end faster. I stopped posting anything online. I stopped picking up calls I didn't feel ready for, which was almost all of them. I created so much distance so carefully that eventually people just stopped reaching out. And then I was alone. Properly alone. And part of me was relieved. That relief scared me more than the loneliness did. I want you to think about something for a second. Have you ever been so tired of pretending to be okay that you chose silence just because it asked nothing from you? Because that was exactly where I was. Silence felt safe. It felt like the one place where I didn't have to perform. Weeks passed like that, then a month, then two. I went to work, came home, made food I barely tasted, and sat by that window looking at that brick wall like it owed me an explanation. I wasn't sad exactly. I wasn't crying or falling apart. I was just empty, flat, like someone had turned the volume of my inner life all the way down and I had forgotten where the dial was. My colleague at work, a woman named Sarah who was 31 and sat 2 desks away from me, noticed something. I didn't know she had noticed. I thought I was being perfectly invisible, which was what I wanted. But apparently invisible and obviously struggling are not always as different as we think. One afternoon she slid a coffee onto my desk without saying anything. I looked up. She wasn't looking at me. She was already back to her screen. I stared at that coffee for a long moment. It was exactly how I had it. No sugar, a little oat milk. I had never told her that. I didn't know how she knew. I didn't say thank you that day. I didn't know how to without it becoming a conversation. But something about that small thing sat with me all evening. Someone had paid attention. Someone had noticed something about me without me performing it. Without me packaging it up and handing it over with a smile. But then something changed, and I didn't see it coming at all. The next day she did it again. Same coffee. Still no comment. No expectation of anything in return. And on the third day, when she placed it down, she just said quietly, without looking up, "You seem like you're carrying something heavy." She didn't ask me to talk about it. She didn't push. She just said it the way you'd say, "It looks like rain," like it was just an observation, no pressure attached to it. And then she went back to her work. I sat with those words the entire day. You seem like you're carrying something heavy. Nobody had said anything like that to me in months. Maybe longer. And the terrifying part was that I almost cried right there at my desk. Not because it was sad, but because being seen, even that quietly, even that briefly, hit something in me that I had locked away so carefully I had almost convinced myself it didn't exist anymore. That evening I sat by my window and I actually thought about it. Really thought. Not the surface version where I told myself I was just tired or just introverted or just going through a phase. I went deeper, and what I found underneath all that silence was not emptiness. It was fear. I was afraid that if I let people in, they would find nothing worth staying for. I had decided somewhere along the way, quietly and without realizing it, that I was too much and not enough at the same time. Too sensitive to explain, not interesting enough to keep around. So I had just removed myself from the equation before anyone else could. That realization sat on my chest like something heavy, but it was also the first honest thing I had felt in a long time. The next morning I got to work and Sarah was already at her desk. I placed a coffee in front of her. Same way she had done for me, no explanation. She looked up and a small smile crossed her face. She didn't make it into a thing. She just nodded and went back to her screen. That was the beginning, not of a dramatic transformation, not of suddenly becoming open and healed and whole, just the beginning of something small cracking open. We started talking in the way quiet people do, slowly, with long pauses that neither of us tried to fill too quickly. She told me once that she had gone through something similar a few years ago. That she had spent almost a year barely speaking to anyone outside of what was necessary. She didn't tell me why. I didn't ask, and somehow that made it easier. But here is what she said that stayed with me. She said, "The problem with going quiet is that after a while, you start to believe your own silence. You start to think it's who you are instead of what you're doing." I turned that over in my mind for days. Because she was right. I had started to believe my own silence. I had mistaken a coping mechanism for a personality. I had built a wall and then convinced myself I was just someone who preferred walls. A few weeks after that conversation, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called Ryan, not because I had something to say, not because I had sorted myself out, just because I missed him and I was tired of pretending I didn't. He picked up immediately. He didn't make it weird. He didn't say, "Wow, you disappeared," or, "Where have you been?" He just said, "Ethan, hey, I was thinking about you the other day." We talked for almost 2 hours. About nothing important, about a show he was watching and a trip he was planning and some argument he'd had with his neighbor about parking. Normal things, small things, and I laughed at something he said, a real laugh, not a performed one. And I realized it was the first time I had laughed like that in months. After I hung up I just sat quietly for a while. I want to ask you something, and I really want you to think about it. Is there someone in your life you've been meaning to reach out to but keep putting off? Someone you miss but keep convincing yourself it's too late or too awkward or too much? Because I promise you, most of the time it isn't any of those things. Most of the time they're just waiting too. Things didn't change dramatically after that. I want to be honest about that because I think we do people a disservice when we pretend healing is a single moment. It isn't. It's more like learning to walk again after you've been still for too long. Slow, sometimes frustrating, but real. I started answering more calls. Not all of them, but more. I started showing up to things even when the old part of me said it was too much effort. I started telling the truth in small ways. When someone asked how I was, sometimes I said, honestly, not great, instead of, fine. And the world didn't end. People didn't leave. Most of the time they leaned in closer. Sarah and I had lunch a few times. She never made me feel like I needed to explain myself or justify the months I had gone quiet. She just treated me like someone worth being around. And slowly, carefully, I started to believe that maybe she wasn't wrong. I'm 27 now, not that much time has passed. I haven't fixed everything. There are still days when the silence feels safer. Still moments when I pull back without meaning to. But I notice it now. I see it happening and I can make a different choice. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. The thing I understand now that I didn't understand then is this. Isolation can feel like protection. But most of the time it's just postponed pain. You're not avoiding the hard feelings by going quiet. You're just building them a bigger room to live in. And the people who are worth having in your life, the real ones, they don't need you to be perfect or put together or fully healed before they show up for you. Sometimes all it takes is someone placing a coffee on your desk without a word. And sometimes all it takes is you letting them. If any part of this story felt familiar to you, I want you to leave a comment below and tell me. You don't have to share everything. Even just saying, "I felt this," is enough. Because one of the loneliest things about loneliness is believing you're the only one in it. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who might need it today. And if you want more stories from Untold Perspectives, subscribe and stay with us. There are more voices here waiting to be heard.